Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, Island Council members and members of the Central Committee, Rolando Wilson, Vito Charles, Saskia Matthew, Island Registrar, Ms. Akila Levinstone, Island Governor and Chairman of the Island Council, Jonathan Johnson, members of the Executive Council, Commissioner Everton Haliger and Commissioner Bruce Sagers, Island Secretary, civil servants, and to the general public, whether present here today or viewing via live stream. Welcome to the Central Committee meeting of Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. Before going into the agenda points, allow me to mention the absence of Island Council member Julio Every, who is absent with notice. Today we have 7 points on the agenda. Point 1 was the opening, and now I look to the council members for approval of the remaining agenda. So we have approval of the agenda. We now move on to agenda point number 3, which is approval of the minutes of the last Central Committee meeting. We will move this point to the next Central Committee meeting as the minutes are not yet ready for this session. I now move on to agenda point number 4, which is citizens' right to speak on agenda points. I was informed that no requests by inhabitants had been received. We can therefore move on to agenda point number 5, which is the oral question round concerning announced questions from Island Council incoming correspondence during the period of October 4th to October 31st, 2025. This is in line with Article 18 of the Rules of Procedures of the Island Council meeting. The first point was an Executive Council letter number 343, 2025, Island Council motion, strengthening local public health role in healthcare, referral and monitoring. I now pass on the floor to Island Council member Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. Madam Chair, in July 2025, the Island Council passed a motion to strengthen the role of public health in healthcare referral monitoring. In October 2025, the Executive Council responded with a letter outlining an alternative approach, including relying on existing channels and providing biannual updates instead of the quarterly updates required in the motion. Madam Chair, through you, I would like to clarify whether this letter was intended as a request to amend the motion, since the motion was passed and needs to be executed. That's the first question.
We'll move on to answering this question first, so it's made easier. Are you ready to answer, Commissioner Haliger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you reframe the question for me, please? Can you repeat it? Sorry, I was.
So, like I said, in July, there was a motion passed, and in October, the Executive Council shared a letter with Island Council outlining alternative approaches to deal with the motion that was passed. So my question is just to clarify if the letter was intended as a request to amend the motion, since it was already passed.
I don't think it was intended to amend the motion.
Island Council member Matthew, you had additional questions on this point as well, correct? Yes. Okay, you can continue.
So, Madam Chair, since the letter was not intended to amend the motion, I would just like to ask the Executive Council for a timeline that they foresee for carrying out the resolutions of the motion.
Thank you, Island Council member Matthew. Commissioner Haliger, you have the floor.
To answer the question from the Island Council member, I will have to once again sit down with the head of the Public Health Department and come up with some answers to your question and probably get back to you with a timeline.
Okay, so just to confirm on this point, we have a commitment that the commissioner will come up with a time frame in which this point can be addressed, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does that conclude for you, Island Councilmember Matthew? Okay, so now we move on to the next agenda point, which was the Integrity Summit. However, I was informed that the time for this agenda point has passed, so we will skip this one. And we therefore move on to Agenda Point 6, which is Island Council Proposal 2026.1, SABA Language Policy. I would first move on to Commissioner Heiliger, who will give an introduction to the policy, and this will be followed by a presentation, which the public would also be able to view online by Ms. Ellen Summers, who is a policy advisor at the Department of Community Development and Culture. Commissioner Heiliger, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon once again to the Island Council members, members of the Executive Council, the listening public here present, and those joining via live streaming. Madam Chair, I would like to begin by thanking the Island Council for its leadership and its continued commitment to shaping policies that reflect the realities and aspirations of the people of Saba. Today, we present the Saba language policy for adoption. I want to recognize the Community Development and Culture Department, our schools, and all stakeholders who contributed to this policy. This document is not just the result of technical work. It reflects the voices, experiences, and lived reality of our community. It is precisely this collective effort that gives this policy its strength and legitimacy. Madam Chair, this language policy is not simply about language. It is about equity, access, and opportunity. For too long, we have been navigating a system where the linguistic reality of Saba does not always align with the structures we are required to operate within. We are a people rooted in English and Saban English, function within a Dutch legal and educational framework, and increasingly shaped by a diverse, multilingual community. That reality is not a weakness, it is our strength. But without the right policies in place, it can also become a barrier. And that is the issue this policy seeks to address. You will be given a presentation which will also be live streamed here today. Because if our systems do not reflect the lived reality of our people, then we risk creating inequality by intention, but by design. Not by intention, but by design. This policy makes a clear and necessary shift. It recognizes that Saban English is a vital part of our identity and must be valued and preserved. It affirms English as a functional language of our society and region. And it acknowledges the importance of Dutch while also calling for a more realistic and fair approach to how it is taught and applied, particularly in our education system, which is shared in numerous findings lately. It also speaks directly to the challenges we see in our schools today, where too many of our students are asked to navigate multiple language expectations without the structural support they need to succeed. That is why this policy does not stop at recognition, it calls for action. A more differentiated and inclusive approach to language education, a reassessment of existing requirements where necessary, investment in language support systems, and a stronger alignment between local realities and national frameworks. At the same time, it promotes inclusion beyond the classroom by expanding opportunities for adult language learning, strengthening our reading culture, and ensuring that government services remain accessible to all. Most importantly, this policy is grounded in who we are as a people. It is practical, it is realistic, and it is built with Saba's scale and capacity in mind. Language must never be a barrier to opportunity on Saba. It must be a bridge, one that connects our people to education, to opportunity, and to full participation within our society and within the kingdom. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Heiliger. Now we will have the presentation by Ms. Ellen. You can.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending, Island Council members and also Executive Council and colleagues, public entity. And Commissioner Heiliger, thank you for the introduction. We're going to present today the language policy for SEBA. It's a multi-annual plan. Like the Commissioner indicated, it's really first into the current reality that SEBA is facing, but also based on, within the legal framework that we are working with. So, there you go. The structure of the presentation today will be as follows. It briefly, mostly follows also the chapters that are addressed in the policy itself. So we're talking a little bit about the background, about the goals and objectives, the laws and the regulations, so the legal framework in which the policy is developed. Then the key focal themes of the language policy are language and culture, so that is more on the SEBA English, language and education, that means the lifelong learning and the multilingualism that takes place within that lifelong learning. And then the last one is public life, which concerns the reading culture as well as government communication. So, as a start, the purpose of the language policy is to recognize language as a vital part of our current society. And it's also a tool for inclusion, dignity, and justice, not only on SEBA, but in the broader global community. So we really want to recognize and support also the multiple languages that are present on SEBA and how we can use these as a strength. And these then come to the front in culture, in education, and in public life. Then the policy is also aligned with other initiatives. So there's the education agenda, that is an agenda developed by OCW, also together with the schools. And for them, it really is a key point to have this language policy in place. So that was actually the driver to have this policy in place, was the education agenda, because it provides the excellent opportunity to get all the challenges that we face and get them together in one consistent and coherent plan. The other ones that it aligns with is Community Development Culture Policy Plan, which was adopted last year, and the Cultural Policy for SEBA that is in its last stages before approval. Then also the part on government communication that especially in crisis management, that contains a strong language component as well. So all these different policies that we have and that are in development, we try to align them as much as possible. The current situation on SEBA, there's different types of languages being spoken. There's the SEBA English, there's Standard English, there's Dutch, there's Spanish, Creole, and all these together, they really make up the community of SEBA as it is today. And if we see the change after 2010 with the new BES Island structure, then it really had, really looking back on that moment up to now, you see that especially the Dutch is getting a little bit more, it's gaining, I wouldn't say it's gaining importance, but it does have a bigger role because of the stronger connection to The Hague. Then the main goal of the language policy is to promote multilingualism, because it's a strength for the island. And this also connects strongly to language rights. And if you invest in people's language, you also promote equal opportunities. And that is a very important one that we want to address with this policy. So the approach has to be fair, inclusive, and rational, especially considering the resources and capacity that we have on island. The core objectives of the policy, there's a focus on SEBA English to protect and promote it within the framework of language rights. Also investing in multilingual proficiency that start from 0 up to 99 years old. So it's a lifelong learning approach. supporting newcomers. This is to do with equal opportunities and labor market integration and education integration connected to the opportunities that's up there. Then literacy, this is not only something that we see on SEBA, but it's actually worldwide. People are reading less, and for your own learning and development and understanding the world around you, it's important to have a basic or even advanced level of literacy so you can access information and develop. And then finally, there's the government communication. While most of it is in English, there are certain moments, for example, in crisis communication, where we would need to consider not only English, but also other languages to make sure you reach the whole community. Yep. This slide that we're seeing, this one is giving a brief introduction on the laws and regulations that are in place surrounding the language policy. So the official language status is tied to the Invoeringswet BES, and that shows that both English and Dutch are being used, but that English is permitted for education, legal, and government. And then within the education, there's a requirement for the academic stream for secondary school to reach the B2 level Dutch, while the CVQ track can go up to B1 level. And yeah, there's been some back and forth with the ministry on this, so we got the confirmation that the students who can still get a diploma even if they don't get to this level. And then because of there are some European regulations, like international regulations, that also protect and promote different type of languages. And since the European Netherlands adopted these and ratified these regulations, they're also applicable to SEBA. So that's the one on the bottom. First of all, the SEBA English. So from the policy goals, we really try to recognize and protect and promote SEBA English in non-formal education ways. So that would be more initiatives by the culture department, by the library, to really protect and promote the English spoken on SEBA. Yeah. In the education system, so this is the second pillar of the policy, we really aim for inclusive and multilingual policy goals, so strengthen multilingualism from all the way from 0 up to 99. So it supports equal opportunities, and also we wish to encourage differentiation because everybody starts at a different level, everybody has a different basis. So some people grow up in a Spanish-speaking household, others in an English-speaking. So how do you make sure that you are really becoming well literate in either or one of those languages or all of them? So this is, given the various backgrounds of the people living on SEBA, it's really good to keep that into account as well. Yeah. So within the education system, we have some key policy recommendations for the schools, and that is to develop inclusive plans for their students and embed this in the curriculum. Have a better alignment of Dutch instruction, because at the moment sometimes it's a little bit fragmented, also due to the availability of Dutch teachers, and expanding also more of the practical usage of the language, because it's very theoretical at the moment. So it's very important, especially for youth who are considering moving off island to the Netherlands, to get exposure and confidence in talking different languages. And with the adult language education, we collaborate with SEBA Reach Foundation, and they are offering different type of language courses, including Dutch, Spanish, and more of the informal language learning that will be taken on by the library. Yeah. The final pillar is the public life, so that is about developing a reading culture. It's promoting youth from an early age and encourage them to read. We have the book starter project done by the library. The school is already taking youth to the library to encourage reading and get them familiar with whatever the different activities that are going on over there. Then for the government communication, we're working on language guidelines, like, to make sure that the English that is being used is readily understandable for the broad public, and provide translations where necessary. For example, if there's crisis communication taking place, making sure that we have different languages available to make sure that we reach the whole public. Yeah. And then for the final one is bridging policy and practice, and this is more on the hiring of staff from public entity perspective, that we make sure that we maintain this diversity as well in staff, so that we can adequately reach out to the public and communicate where necessary. So to conclude, we really want to promote with this language policy multilingualism across all of the age groups, starting from 0 up to adult, and also making sure that all residents have the opportunity to develop their language skills, either English, Dutch or Spanish, to really make sure that they can fully participate and that they can get the opportunities that they deserve. Yeah. So that is my bottom line. Yeah. Well, thank you. And for this one, I also want to especially credit Abigail Johnson, who has been taking the lead for developing the policy. She was our regs trainee last year, and yeah, she had a big part to play in developing this policy, so special credit to her.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now move on to some questions that will, excuse me, be addressed to you. Just to remind the Island Council, technical questions, of course, is asked to Ms. Ellen. Any political questions will be addressed to the Executive Council. We will first move on to Island Council Member Wilson. You may now proceed with questions that you may have.
Good afternoon, the members of the Island Council, members of the Executive Council, radio listeners, and persons sitting down in the audience. Madam Chair, through you, I know there's a lot of questions here today that I sent in. Probably they won't be able to answer them now, but they can also do it in writing to us. But I would like to start with a few. The implementation and monitoring. What role will who will check that? The implementation and monitoring. And the second, what role will technology play in the implementation?
You could go ahead.
Oh, what role, right? In the book, started working, how is it being checked? As for promoting the Saba Creole language, is a good step for all to be made aware of. Who will be creating these booklets for the students? How will the reading culture be promoted in the public, to the public, sorry. My question is the following. Does both schools work according to an extensive curriculum? Is there a curriculum for the Dutch language? 6, rightfully stated, there is a high turnout of teachers, especially for Dutch. Low motivation for Dutch and other subjects has to be with what is being offered and how is it being offered. Who will work on those? Also, it should be clearly stated that in the framework, it also stated that students of the Sacred Heart School have to obtain a A1/A2 level of proficiency. It was always stated that B2 would only be possible for native Dutch speakers? Will it now become a A2 and a B1? Role play, story wings, dramas, and those being offered? Is there a time limit for this within the two schools? Point 9. When did the name? No, I saw that already. Yeah. Different approach sounds like a great idea, but how can this be done at an early age? Will recommendation that are stated in the language policy, will these be implemented in the curriculum? Is there a curriculum at the Sacred Heart School for Dutch language? Why is it then that with every new Dutch teacher, there is another plan of action? It is said in the intake of students from abroad are fairly high. These students come from Nepal, Colombia, Santo Domingo, and Suriname, etc. And for some, there is a language problem. The schools are in their need of an ELTS teacher that can assist these students. Are the teachers being soon on the English policies? That's it, the question. And I will submit them again, and you all can give me the answers in writing. Gladly give me the answers in writing.
Thank you, Island Council Member Wilson. I think Commissioner Heiliger wants to give
Yeah,
a
thank you, Madam
remark.
Chair. Yeah, thank you for the questions, Councilmember Wilson. Those will have to be given back to you in written form, if you don't mind. They will have to be given back to you in written form, if you don't mind, the questions that you were asking.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you shared those same questions already today. I don't really know, but, yeah?
Yes, I share them.
Okay.
Okay, so before we move on to the next Island Council Member, Ellen, did you want to give any remarks, or can we?
Yeah, thank you for your follow-up questions, because indeed they do address some of the things that are necessary to reflect in the policy, and some of them are addressed. So we will, we will come back to you with the answers in writing, because that will provide us sufficient opportunity to really give detailed answer to your question.
Thank you. We will now move on to Island Councilman Charles. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, Ms. Summers. I read through the policy in advance, and your PowerPoint presentation was able to fill in some gaps that I had. And so I also was just wondering, if there's an opportunity to provide more input for this policy, because I think there's a need to see more. And especially in light, we had a conversation just this morning with the Underway SRAT, and they also just presented a report where they highlighted deficiencies in the school system, particularly where it regards to Dutch. And I think when you look at that and how important Dutch is in government, in the labor market to a certain degree, and for the education system, particularly for students going to the Netherlands, I think we really need to focus a bit more on outcomes when it comes to that. And I don't necessarily see that reflected in policy. I'm just wondering if they have any ideas of what outcomes, because you mentioned, or there is a mention of reassessing the B2 requirement. And Councilman Wilson also spoke about, initially there was this discussion about one specific point and then another one. And so we keep going back and forth. But I think the question has to be asked, what ultimately do we want to expect from students when they leave school? And how should they be able to participate with their language in those various forms that we spoke about? So, could I go with that question first?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Charles. Ms. Summers, you can respond.
Good. Thank you for the additional questions. Yes, indeed, I must state first that the policy was developed last year and initially presented to the Island Council in August. So of course, since then, some other developments have taken place that are not fully incorporated yet. So I propose we have another meeting on this and then see what else, like new updates that we can integrate, because it might be that some of the objectives are there, but they can be fine-tuned a little bit. I do think it touches upon the subjects that you mentioned, but yeah, if we can make it a little bit more catered to the current situation, then yeah, we can work on that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would also like to speak because I don't necessarily see reflected in the policy also the mention of the labor market, and Dutch can access the labor market. And of course, if you look specifically on SABRE, you might say it's not necessarily a limiting factor. But it's not only on SABRE. I think the report speaks about the 3 public entities. We're also part of a constellation of 6 Dutch Caribbean islands. And also, I see a lot of times we are hiring persons from abroad to come to work on SABRE, particularly from our sister Dutch Caribbean islands. But what we often don't see, I'm not telling anybody they should have to leave SABRE, but that's another way the labor market should function. You know, maybe I want to grow somehow and I want to go, for instance, to Bonaire and I want to go to Curacao. But it's not possible because there, and specifically in government, it requires that you speak some Dutch. Or you speak Dutch, not some Dutch, you speak Dutch. So I do think that that also needs to be addressed to some degree on how do we prepare persons who want to go onto the labor market, but also those on the labor market, to improve their Dutch language instruction. And I do recognize, of course, that we have a growing population from other countries, and I do think it's important that we do have courses for persons so that they can communicate with local native English speakers, but also we can address them to some degree in their language. So I think it's very important that there's opportunities for development of the language in general.
Thank you, Island Councilman Charles. Do you have any additional remarks, or we can move on?
Yeah, it's again a valid point, which we can further elaborate on when we are having our next follow-up meeting on this policy. Then we can look further into it.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Does that conclude for your questions? Thank you. We now move on to Island Council Member Matthew. Do you have any follow-up questions? No? Okay, so that would conclude this question round, and to conclude this agenda point, we will have a follow-up meeting on the language policy, which everyone will again be able to provide feedback, and this feedback will then be incorporated. So then at the next Island Council meeting in May, this can go back on the agenda for approval. Thank you so much, Ms. Summons, for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your time and dedication, along with everyone else who's assisted. Thank you. We now move on to agenda point 7, which is closing. So at this time, I would like to thank you all for joining the Central Committee meeting of today, Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. After closing this meeting, we'll take about 10 minutes per se to transition and take a short break before starting the Island Council meeting, where further agenda points will be discussed. Thank you again for joining this meeting, and see you again in about 10 minutes. Thank you, and meeting closed. Yeah, oral question.